Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Reputation Room. This podcast sits at the intersection of reputation, business, and leadership. So does our guest today, Michela Ratti. Michela's remarkable depth in her perspectives makes her an extremely interesting human being, let alone a communicator with a lot to say. Michela and I met a few years ago at a leadership retreat, have been in touch sporadically, and reconnected when she came across this podcast. She thought the podcast was a great idea and product, my words, and I reciprocally thought that she'd be a great guest for it. And here we are. Michela is half Italian, half Welsh, speaks 4 languages, and her career has taken her to China, Switzerland, the US, and Italy. Interestingly, she's proven herself in multiple sectors, including consumer goods, tech, and luxury. Until very recently, Michela was Chief Brand and Communications Officer for Ferragamo, where luxury and glamour meet. Michela, I'm super glad to have you with me today.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be on this podcast. I love it. Congratulations on your first 2 episodes.
Thank you, Michela, and thank you for your kind words and for being an avid listener of this podcast as well. So let's talk a little bit about yourself first. So Michela, half Italian and half Welsh. So I need to ask, who wins in that tension between the Italian expressiveness and the Welsh sense of community and collective?
Oh, I always get asked that, but that's like asking a sports fan to pick between soccer and rugby, right? I'm both. I think, there's something that I'm so proud of on both aspects. Wales is, a tiny country, but I like to think it punches above its weight when it comes to invention and creativity. Did you know that it was a Welshman who invented the equal sign? And the reason I'm saying that to you is, as communicators, he got so tired of writing out is equal to that he thought that 2 straight lines equal in length would be able to communicate just as clearly, just as easily, and be simpler for everyone. So he invented by communicating. Wales also gave the world the NHS. So on a good side, let's look at it as accessibility to healthcare. And then I think my Italian side is just, Italy's such a beautiful country. And what it's taught me is, it's not really true if people don't feel it, right? Everything in Italy provokes an emotion in some way, shape, or form. So I would say that I'm definitely both, and both countries have more in common than you probably realize.
I see. That's very interesting, the equal sign thing.
It is. Well, I think growing up in Wales is such a small country, then, Welsh community does a really good job of underlining to everybody everything famous that has ever come out from Wales, from Catherine Zeta-Jones and Tom Jones to like the equal sign, and there's many more. Ball bearings were commercialized in Wales. Lots of things.
Very proud of themselves. That's good. Second question, more on the personal side, Michela. I was doing some research about you, and I found out you are an engineer who graduated with honors.
That's correct. Yes.
How does someone who graduates with honors in engineering end up leading comms and corporate affairs and brand for multiple companies, but most recently for a luxury brand?
That's a question I get asked quite a lot. But I think if we take a step backwards, engineering is about curiosity, and it's about understanding systems, and it's about understanding cause and effect. And I think in a way that's partially what we do as communicators, right? We think about what's the impact of what our company says or what our spokespeople are going to say, and how is that going to land in the markets, and what are going to be the consequences. Obviously, it's one thing if you're building a bridge. If you don't build it very well, it's going to fall down. Or in my case, I was building plants to make detergents. And if I messed up, then they would explode. But I think one thing that characterizes both businesses is that they're still very much driven on insight, as well as impact. And that's what I try to do in the work that I do today. And I think part of what helped me get there was how I got into communications. So I got, after being 5 years in R&D, and I'd traveled the world watching people do their laundry or clean their bathrooms as part of the job I was in at the time, so I could understand how to make a better product. I realized how much work goes into things that companies make, and I found it fascinating to talk about it to people. And then I found that I was quite good at translating these stories to people, and that's how I ended up in communications. But it's still the cause and effect lever that I find translates pretty well. But aren't you an engineer as well, Javier? I thought
I'm
you were an
not.
engineer.
No,
Oh,
I'm a
no.
psychologist and journalist.
Oh, that's a very scary combination.
Listen, you were talking about understanding systems, and I will want to go back to that one because I can see a parallel between the understanding systems in the engineering world and understanding systems in the communications or reputation world, right? So I will
Yeah.
I will ask you to expand on that. I think it's a really good insight. So when you started working in the early 2000s for Procter and Gamble, did you ever expect our job to look what it looks like today?
I mean, I don't think anybody could have imagined what it would look like today. It's changed so much. Communications has changed so much, even in the last 5 years, even in the last 6 months, since large language models have really taken up, right? I think at the beginning, when I started working in communications, when I had just transitioned from engineering, it was more about managing the press, landing, whatever messaging that you wanted to with the press, controlling to a certain extent, or defending. I think now it's a lot more about shaping what's happening. Very often you're part of a narrative that's very, very often bigger than you. That's happening in multiple channels with multiple people. It's not just, the one or two gatekeepers of members of the press that are shaping what's happening. And I think that's made a very material change. So I think that where the direction is going, and the communicators who are going to be able to succeed in the near-term future are the ones who are going to be able to recognize what's happening in these systems. Funnily enough, going back to what I said in the last question that you gave me, and how able they're going to be to run models or understand models given the majority of tools that are available to us. So it's the ability to read that and to interpret the data, and interpret data in terms of what is underpinning movements in pop culture.
Yeah, and this difference between controlling and shaping, I love that, right? I mean, I also remember, right, when 20 years ago, we would operate. Well, at the time, I was not in a company. I was on the agency side, but I remember that when you would try to pitch some news to reporters or whatever, yeah, I mean, everything was way slower and everything was way simpler, leading to a higher ability to control what was out there, right?
Absolutely.
Today, it's about much more, to your point, about understanding the system in which you are operating, and then pinpointing how you can become relevant and shape the conversation, the right conversations at the right time, which is a much more complex and fast-paced environment.
It is. And I think there's so many more players involved as well. Like I said, it's not just the one gatekeeper or channel. I mean, it used to be, let's say that something was written up that was factually incorrect, then it was easier to get it rescinded or to
Exactly.
course correct or to get somebody else to correct it. I mean, now things happen so quickly. There are so many other channels that news or thought or whatever could get out in. And it's how do you get in front of that? And how do you shape that conversation? And how do you make sure that your side of the story is the most credible and the most trusted? Because I think today the biggest challenge that we're facing as communicators is the trust deficit that society as a whole is facing right now.
Yeah. Good. So based on our conversations, Michela, you've always struck me as a business oriented leader, and always making sure that what your team does drives business impact. How does one develop? How does one develop that instinct?
I think you're right in saying how do you develop it. I wouldn't say it's instinct. I think it's training. I was very fortunate to start my career in Procter and Gamble. It's a company that's very well run. It's very clear in terms of everybody in the company, from the CEO to the people manning the reception desks, know what the goal of the company is. What does it want to achieve? And how is it going to get there? It was very clearly articulated, and I think I was able to learn a lot from that. I think it's very important. If you're a communicator, you need to know the outcome of what is it that you are trying to shape, those messages, and are we any good at it? So I think part of what I've learned is to articulate, what are we in the business of? Are we any good at it? How can we be better at doing it? And then what's the impact of it? Why does it matter? And I think that doing that, I've been lucky enough to work in companies that had very clearly articulated goals that were easy to share within all of the functions. And I don't think that communication should be any different. So, if you're in something that's in a hypergrowth phase, it might be, how do I get from being number 10 or number 5 in the market to being number 1? What are the people at number 1 doing that's better than us? How can we challenge them? I think that that's just as relevant for somebody in communications as in any other area. What's been your experience, though?
Yeah, and I was going to say to that point, Michela, that I'm with you that the business goals are everybody's goals, but I don't know if you will agree with me, but corporate affairs in general has struggled historically with the idea of having measurable, tangible outcomes and goals that are predefined before we do anything, right? What's your reaction to what I just said?
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation, but I think it comes down to, corporate affairs has very often been seen as the function for the firefighters, the people who got called in to do the cleaning when the mess has already happened. And yet where it can add the most value is when corporate affairs has a seat at the table and is defining together with the business, what is it that is achievable and how is it going to be achievable, and how is the company going to walk the talk, right? And be believed by everything from the employees to external stakeholders. And I think it's that mindset shift from being, here's a press release or here's an issue, go and clean it up, to what are we trying to achieve and what do we stand for and why. I think that's where the real difference comes in. And that's before you get to the conversation on measurement. That's
Yes.
my take on it from what I've observed.
Yeah, and you are not the first guest that makes the point about comms being the firefighter function, right? When the company gets in trouble, we want to fix a business issue via comms, which is probably at that point is too late, right? So it's a good point. So listen, going back to your career journey, I do see you've been with Procter and Gamble, eBay, Swarovski, Ferragamo, also on the consultancy side. How do you adjust to such different company cultures, industry sectors?
Um, and that's only part of it. Although some of those episodes that you mentioned were returning gigs, right?
Mhm.
So that's something else that I have, is that there's a couple of companies that I've gone back to. But I think it's we work in a I think that communications can be industry agnostic. I think that a lot of our industry gets very hung up on this person is a farmer communicator, or this person is a luxury communicator, or this person is a tech communicator, because we all are in the same business, which is the business of trust, right? That's ultimately what we need to do for the companies that we serve. And it's, can those companies build trust at scale? And can the institution build trust with its most important stakeholders, which is, the employees, the customers, and the people that do business with them? And I think the principles of that, you're a psychologist, no? You're a psychologist and a journalist. Then is it Jung said that people's dreams were universal? No, I believe. And it's the same. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with emotions, a lot of the time. So I would say that surprisingly, the role itself wasn't that different between the companies. Obviously, if you go from a $100 billion company to a family business, then maybe the culture is different.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think that it's necessarily a deal breaker. I think it's something that is interesting. And when you go down to the why of it all, like I said, I think that the challenges and the opportunities that they face when you take away things like budget and people and resources,
Yeah.
but they're ultimately not that different.
And I'm sure it's super enriching career journey for you personally, which is great. Let's talk a little bit about your latest gig at Ferragamo. How does a luxury brand define reputation?
I would say that its reputation in a luxury business is just like reputation anywhere else. It's the gap between what you say you're going to do, what people actually experience, and how people interpret that gap and how visible it is. It's just that in luxury, actually, I think it's very often turned up even more. Part of that is because it's a business that's selling dreams, right? Very often, what somebody is buying has a very high emotional component to it, because you're spending a lot of money on something which you're buying either for status, for power, for self-worth, for fulfilling an emotional desire, let's say. And so if that doesn't do what it says on the box,
Uh-huh.
then a reputation issue could hit quite hard, quite quickly. And I think that's something that people tend to underestimate about the industry.
You just said when defining reputation, you gave me a very similar definition than someone who I was speaking with also for this podcast earlier this month. But you added one element. So let me explain. You said it's the gap between what you say and what people experience. That is exactly what the other person said. But your added element was and how they interpret that experience, how they live that experience. Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
Well, if you are, it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or if you've saved up your entire life for something.
Uh-huh.
if you walk into a luxury store or walk away with a luxury product, then you're expecting it to be of the highest quality, that it's been produced in an ethical, responsible, sustainable way, that you're going to feel great about what you've spent your hard-earned money on. I think that all of those elements need to be curated from end to end. I think there's a lot of responsibility that comes with selling something with an elevated price tag, just in terms of the sustainability of the supply chain, the sustainability of the raw materials. And I think it all goes to add up to that experience. It's, again, when I was saying before about the difference probably between engineering and what I do today, is a better understanding of the impact of the human element of it. But the business that I've been in most recently, the beauty and fashion businesses, are ones that are businesses of dreams, right? How to make dreams real. And I think that because of that more emotional need rather than a functional need, then I think it's easier for those dreams to crumble more quickly. So I think they need to be protected with more care. How does that sound to you? Do you?
Yeah, no, and I was thinking, how do you in the fashion, beauty, luxury sector? So nowadays, Michela, the world is in trouble, right? And the world is suffering, right? And the other day, preparing this interview, I was thinking, wars, conflicts, polarizing ideologies, very particular leaders at the highest level across geographies. How do you, in that context and in that environment, how do you position a luxury brand and stay relevant in the midst of such existential threats?
I think, to answer your question, I think that it's no different for luxury than it is for any industry at the moment. I think that everybody is feeling the need for very authentic, very sincere communications. I think it's probably a moment also for restraint, and for being very measured in that what you're saying is something that is adding value and that is not going to be superfluous or superficial in a moment where there's so much crazy things going on. That said, though, I do think that I have had the benefit of working in businesses such as luxury and in beauty, where particularly in tough times, it's like, you've heard of the lipstick effect, right? It's where people buy small luxuries to help themselves feel better, and to have a moment of joy. So I'd be all for giving joy, but I think that there is a need to be responsible and cautious and more clear than ever. The other thing that I would say at the moment, though, and that's more a consequence of the world that we're living in today and also the advent of social media, is that I think possibly luxury more than any other industry, and beauty as well, used to be governed by very few gatekeepers. There were certain chains of editorial houses, which I won't mention who they were, but there are movies made about them. There are, so there were very, very elite stores. There were very few places where people could have access to luxury, and that's completely changed. And I think that it's no longer a verticalization of messaging and of information. I think it's become much, much more horizontal. I think you're more likely to revert to people that you trust, the true influencer. So not the influencer in the sense of somebody who's paid to promote a product. It's somebody who has an influence on you because you trust them. And I think that part of the reason of that is every institution on the planet is having to relearn how to be believed by people who no longer trust authority in the world that we live in today. And that just makes it harder. That's moving the gatepost for people who work in roles like ours.
Yeah, and I would actually add to that, it's horizontal and maybe it's matrixed, is happening in this web type
Yes,
thing. You never know where things begin and end, right?
that's true.
And how things can travel. Right?
Yes, that's true. Although that brings me to another point, I think, which is probably why that's thank the Lord for AI in that one, because at least one great use of AI is finding out where people are talking about you, what they're saying about you, and with which impact. It's, stakeholder mapping to the nth degree is one of the things that you can use AI for now when you do a deep listening exercises and do pattern recognition and lookalike profiling to understand who's talking about you where. But I think when you're talking about the matrix, it is very surprising, the interconnectivity when you map these things out. Have you ever tried to do that?
I have, yeah. It's
some of the most surprising things that you've seen?
No, it's amazing. Even though I have to say that from my personal use of AI, the real-time element of the different engines is not yet there, right? Which gives you a little bit of a lag.
Yes.
Between what the given AI engine is going to give you and what is actually in reality happening. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, there's a bit of a lag, but I still think that in terms of finding pattern recognition and understanding where your communities are and where they're not, I still think it's giving access that wasn't available before.
100%. Yeah.
But the other thing is it is evolving all the time as well, though, right? So
yes, it is.
Scary thought.
I was going to say, let's close the Ferragamo phase. But let me ask you something first before we wrap that piece up. You joined the company at a difficult time for the company. How do you establish yourself in that context? And what was the expectation, the mandate from the company?
Well, actually, it's my second time in the company. I enjoyed myself so much that I went back when I was called back. I think that in any kind of turnaround, and I have worked on a number of brand turnarounds, and I think it's fair to say that the Ferragamo mandate was one of a turnaround. Then the first place to start is to build trust with your team. I think it's to identify a very clear objective and also be very clear on what are you trying to do and why you need to do it to the people that are working with you, whether that be the executive team, whether it be your team, whether it be your peers. Be very clear on what you can do in communications and what you can't do. And also break it down into clear chunks with a very clearly explained timeline as well. I think one of the things that people tend to underestimate when it comes to transformations of brands, of companies, of reputation, is it's not overnight. And it will take time. And I think the other important thing to do is also to celebrate the green shoots and the low-hanging fruits, because it's very rare that I've gone into a brand transformation and everything's been a disaster. Actually, it's never happened to me that I've gone in and everything's been terrible. Usually there's a very good reason for how things got to be the way that they are.
Mhm.
And so I think that it's the discipline on identifying what needs to be done, how it's going to happen, and on what timeline, and sense checking it, obviously, with all of the partners that you work with and pressure testing it to make sure that it's something that people accept, even if there are things in there that might not necessarily be popular choices.
And speaking of transformation, I can also tell you pride yourself and you have a passion for transformation and for change. Change comes and so and I believe that it was with Swarovski where you led a huge transformation for the company from a comms perspective. So what was the place of the concept of reputation in that situation?
Um, I can give you two examples actually,
Uh-huh.
though, because I think that with Swarovski was three businesses being merged into one.
Hmm.
And it was moving an average price point from like 50 euros a piece to 250 euros a piece, so 5 times what it used to be. And I think that there was a need felt by the company to pivot and simplify their operations so that they could have a bigger impact in the market with having everybody joined together rather than operating as 3 separate businesses.
Hmm.
And I think that for that particular thing, it was such a big change, um, that the reputational element was everything. I mean, nobody likes change. It's always difficult. And it's explaining why the company needed to make that change, and that was to accelerate its business results. It was why were people going to spend more? It was because there was a radical redesign of the product itself. It was why were people going to pay more? And it was because rather than going on a benefit of, I need some jewelry, it was something that was going to address how people actually felt with this narrative platform of igniting your dreams. And then the moment that you start to do that, obviously, then the market is going to be, why are people going to, again, why? Why are people going to pay more for that? And it's going to be due to the fact that there's more creativity, that the quality is higher, because the way that these new products are going to make you feel, the way that they're delivered, the provenance, all of these things are going to be something that people will buy into. And it worked. It worked. It was during COVID. It was difficult. I think a bigger transformation that was probably the one at P&G, because P&G is known as a soap company, a detergent company, a
Hmm.
company that makes diapers. So when Procter & Gamble moved into prestige beauty, then we had a reputation issue in terms of credibility that we would be able to play alongside companies who'd been doing this for decades longer, luxury companies, luxury beauty companies, and that we didn't have the pedigree necessary to take on an industry which was run by the few gatekeepers of which we talked before. And I think that there, the reputational element is thinking again back to why do people buy beauty? And it's to put forward the best version of themselves. And so a company that has a growth engine of consumer-driven research, that has more R&D than resources than the majority of other companies in the space, was very well positioned to understand what type of dream they would have to deliver on for the customer that was buying them. And it was a crazy growth story. It was a company that went from 50 million to 12.5 billion in over a decade. That's hypergrowth. That's comparable to some of the tech companies I worked with later, if you think of the scale of the growth.
Absolutely.
But reputation was everything.
Absolutely. In highly stressful moments, Michela, how do you find inspiration to keep going and strength to steer the ship?
Um, I think that I think doing the role that you and I do, I think that stress comes with the job description. You're actually one of the calmest people I know, Javier. You're very, 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 very calm. For me in particular, it's probably, again, I will go back to my background of coming from engineering. And if you build a plant, there are so many things that could go wrong. So I think you learn very quickly on what you can control and what you can't. And you learn to be as prepared as possible for everything that's going to go wrong, knowing that you can't control absolutely everything that's going to go wrong, but at least having some degree of preparedness, that helps. I think the other thing is separating signal from noise. So being able to discern what is a serious problem as to what is agitation that will blow over in not very long at all. What about yourself, though? Again, you're one of the calmest people I know.
And I would
You've got
say
4 kids.
that
You've
we
got
say exactly that's a real crisis and not what happens at work. No, I was going to say I think that the shortest path to chaos is when the leader gets in panic mode, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's a principle that I learned a long time ago, and I try always to stick to, right? I mean, precisely when things are going south is when you need to stay the calmest. So
Somebody once told me an amazing saying, I love using it, which is leaders are like tea bags. You can tell what they're made of when you put them in hot water.
I love that.
Very British expression, but I think it's a great one.
It is a good one. Let's talk about your very hands-on practical experience on leveraging AI to enhance storytelling and customer engagement. Can you share one example?
Oh, I could talk about this all day, so I have to be careful.
Let's go for it.
No, I think there are several. There's one of the things we talked before about identifying who your communities are. What are they saying about you? Where are the barriers to acceptance about your business, your messaging, your products, and how to build trust with that? I think that that's one thing that AI has definitely accelerated. One of the things that I've found very practical is it's been a table leveler for, let's say, smaller or challenger brands, because if you put the right guardrails and you have clarity on your storytelling, on your brand, then you can use agentic storytelling in a way to help you, at least to be a sounding board, to test out how you can better resonate, or which aspect of your narrative will land better where. And once you have that, you can use that as a way of being a lot more visible in large language model search. I mean, people are dramatically changing how they search right now, right? It used to be, going in and searching directly the product or a solution, whereas now it's a lot more complex. People will say, I'm doing this weekend. I want to feel this because I'll be there with this person. And how do I dress it? And that is a lot more nuanced when it comes to splitting your narrative to various different use cases and scenarios. But if you work with platforms like there's Writer, there's a number of AI aggregators, then it can dramatically improve your visibility. I think that we're going into a golden age for storytelling as far as that is concerned. Other pragmatic uses for AI are things like propensity modeling, of identifying people who you might not have thought of that would be a particularly receptive audience for your company. Other things which I think are incredibly interesting is omni-channel modeling. So that uses real-time data from mobile phones to give an idea of how much digital content drives path to purchase in store, for example. I find all of these things amazing. I think there's so much that could be done when it comes to issues and crisis management, again, in terms of pattern recognition, right? And in terms
Yes.
of speed of interpretation of things. But I'd be interested from your perspective. What have you been doing with it? Because I've been talking so much to so many people in communications recently, and there's nobody that I've spoken to who isn't using AI in some way, shape, or form that is
Yeah.
dramatically different to how they would have imagined.
I think we all are in the same boat, right? I mean, we're all trying to figure it out. I would say, and I was talking about this a while ago. I think that I had an exchange on LinkedIn about this one in terms of uh, we need courageous leaders that are willing to invest in terms of talent, in terms of monies, and most importantly, in terms of prioritizing how to integrate AI and make everybody's lives easier in terms of your team, how we operate, etc. Right? I have the I think that it's undeniable that companies are now fully embarked on this AI. I was gonna say wave. It's not really a wave. It's a wave comes and goes, but maybe repeats. But AI is here to stay. But the thing is, I'm still missing finding those leaders who are willing to put AI at the very center of how we operate.
Why do you think that is, though? I mean, I can tell you from my examples that there've been very real concerns, obviously, for things like GDPR and trust.
Yes.
I think that companies tend to err on the side of caution. It doesn't help that there have been, there's so many high emotions around the use of AI. AI is going to replace people. It's going to take our jobs. There's, the big, very real concerns, as well as bias against women, for example, is one of the things that comes up a lot. Or there were cases, I think recently I read something about Claude, that before more recent versions of Claude came out, that Claude was sort of like starting to have some bad vibes in the way that it interacted with people. So I can understand that leaders are being cautious, and I think it's fair to challenge the industry partners on the AI side, and flag concerns that are very real. But like in most things, I think that dialogue would help resolve a lot of those things.
Yeah, and obviously you cannot walk into all that fully blinded, right? That would be irresponsible. However, I think it's undeniable that we all need to embrace this, and that the potential for this technology to change the way we operate, think, strategize, and execute is huge. And
Absolutely.
it's time for us to go for it, right? And that's my word of encouragement for everybody out there, that I think we
I
need to
agree.
go for it.
No, I agree. I agree.
So, Michela, you also spend some time advising companies and working on the consultancy side. Tell me more about that.
I did. That was a very humbling experience. I would say humbling and character building. Yeah, I did. I actually worked with my old boss from eBay. He had been the chief comms and brand officer at eBay, and he'd set up his own, and he still has his own advisory. Very smart man, incredibly experienced, and we had a number of clients which included the C-suite of Fortune 500 companies. And I think what I learned going the other side of the table is often within an organization, then your thoughts and ideas may be sometimes executed because of the title that you carry, right? You're the SVP or the CCO or and that carries weight, not in every organization, but it does, and particularly, at a more junior level, I would say. But when it comes to working in an advisory, then you have to have conviction in your own ideas. And it really is your ability to convince sometimes very powerful people that what they're doing may not have the desired outcome that they would necessarily want to. So it's really a torture test on your own ability to convince people in terms of what and why they should do something. I found it very, very difficult compared to what I'd been used to doing at the beginning. But I was very lucky to have a leader who managed to coach me and help me through it, and explain that when people are paying for you in an advisory facility, then the important thing is that they genuinely want to have the real problem presented to them with a number of solutions. But you've also been the other side of the table. So what did you find the difference? Because you did it the other way around, right? You went in from agency to being in-house.
Exactly. And I was starting my career at the time. And to me, my 8 years with, in this case, Edelman, where I always say it was like university outside of university.
Exactly. That's a very good analogy. Yes, it is.
It was really good.
It is. It teaches you a lot. And I'm sure that psychology degree came in useful as well.
Probably. And I was going to say, what was it easier for you to make the case as a consultant versus as the top leader from a comms perspective in-house?
Sometimes, yes. Not always, however, and it depended with whom. So I found that the C-suite would tend to be more receptive. I found that the in-house teams would tend to be highly skeptical. And probably, you can tell me probably as a psychologist why that would be the case. So I learned very quickly that the in-house teams would be my main point of discussion in a constructive way to understand what their concerns were with the advice that I would be bringing in and make sure that they bought into it as well.
You have to high of an expectation on me as a psychologist, Michela.
I think you've been an outstanding one.
Tell me about a mistake that taught you something you've carried through today.
I've been in business a long time. I've learned a lot. I think probably one of the biggest ones, though, is I used to think that if you did your best work and you delivered the best results, that the results would speak for themselves. And I think that's something which I learned isn't true. That you also have to be an advocate for yourself, or you have to build visibility. I'm not talking about playing politics necessarily, but that one can never assume that your work is going to be seen by everybody, and also what you're doing, why you're doing it, why it should matter to them. It's the whole case of make me care. That's something I learned at my expense a long time ago, and I've always carried it with me. I learned the hard way because I kept being frustrated thinking, oh, I'm getting such awesome results, and yet other people are getting promoted before me, and classic things that you feel earlier on in your career. And I think that I started to change, first of all, when I realized that it's not about necessarily competing with other people, but it's more that people understand the value that you bring to the table. So I think that would be one of my bigger learnings that I still carry with me, but there are many. This will be a bottle of wine conversation. I'd love to hear yours too.
And I have a very idealistic view of this, which is very much in line with what you said. I do believe that I've always believed that my work should speak for myself, right? And that nothing else should be needed other than my work, right? But it's also true, and I don't want to paint much of an ugly picture here, but it's true that sometimes, unfortunately, that may not be enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. We are going to be wrapping up in a few minutes, and I have a couple more questions for you, Michela. What is that one trait of yours that has served you well throughout your career?
The ability to translate, I would say, probably comes from being the Welsh Italian person all rolled up into one, or being the engineer that went into beauty, or I have always had a curiosity of why people understand what they understand from something. And I remember reading a book earlier in my career called The Language of Trust by Michael Kurimsky. I don't know if you've read that, but there are some very clear examples in there of what somebody says and what they hear. And what people hear is based on the context that they're in and the situation that they're in. They will interpret what was said in a different way. And I think that at the end of the day, communications is about translating. It's about translating very complex messaging, very complex technologies to people in a way that they embrace it, that they can pass on the story themselves to other people. So I think if I had to pick one thing, it would be translation. I think maybe I would like to say I like to connect dots. I like to spot patterns, and something you've probably heard me saying, but my number one thing would be definitely translation.
Good. What have we not discussed that you'd like to bring up?
Oh my goodness. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think possibly, the first half of my career, I spent trying to make the best products that I could possibly make and convincing people that they were safe and convincing people that they worked. And then the second part was spent more on people understanding that you're trustworthy and that you're believable and that you're not somebody to be discounted in any way, shape, or form. And I think that that's probably where, we're going to have even more of a role to play when it comes to the future of communications, especially in terms of what's real and what's not real, right? If you think about, again, AI slop, fake news, everything like that. So I think what we haven't talked about is really the future of where do we see communications going. And I'd love to know what you think about that.
Did you ever, before I answer that, did you ever feel discounted because you were the communicator in the room?
There's something else that I read the other day as well. That's probably what made me think this. It's whereas very often, you will have the legal person come in and give their opinion, right? I read this. I don't know who posted it. Somebody posted this on LinkedIn. So I need to find out who said it to credit them. But the legal person, the general counsel, will say his opinion and nobody will challenge it. Or they might, say, well, what's the risk and how much is that going to impact whatever? But the finance person will come in and the CFO will give their version on this. These are the numbers and the numbers and the numbers don't lie. I think with the communications person, everybody's an expert in communications. I would say that we get challenged possibly more than other functions.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if you feel the same way. So
100%. I do, yeah. I actually found myself a couple years ago in this leadership team meeting with the commercial leadership team, and after a debate on some communications topic or thing or tactic, I don't remember what the whole thing was about, but I found myself saying, I didn't know I was surrounded by such communications experts in a very ironic fashion. That was my reaction to being faced with all sorts of opinions about what we were trying to do from a comms perspective. So yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. I was
But I
going to
think that
say,
goes back to the data, right? That goes back to having a number of data points and having built up the experience and the systems of the cause and the effect.
and the credibility, exactly.
Being able to say with credibility, exactly, if we do this, this will happen.
Exactly. Okay, second to last question. Any advice for the audience out there listening to us in terms of their work in comms, corporate affairs, career journey, leadership?
I would say that there's probably never been a better time to be in communications. So there seems to be more value attached to the ability to shape narratives and connect businesses with audiences in a relevant way. So I would encourage, I love doing what I do, even though I've had a very broad access to communications. I would say that it's hard work. The media never sleeps, especially today with social media. And I think that there are so many areas also within communications. I would encourage people to do their research and think about which way they would like to go into the science of being believed, which is ultimately what our role entails.
Yes, really nice. Anyone who wants to find you, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn. I am known to be found in the mountains on weekends, one of my personal passions. Or I'm in Zurich. I'm very available. If anybody wants to look me up, have a virtual coffee, I'm more than happy to connect.
Very good. Okay, now my turn for the key highlight of this conversation, or at least one of the key highlights. I wanna basically quote you on this one. I loved it and I noted it down. We are in the business of building trust at scale. So with that said, Michela, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your directness. I very much enjoyed the conversation. And before we go, for the audience, a quick reminder. If you guys enjoyed the conversation, please make sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcast. Thank you, and until next time.